Here we are at Hampton Station Farm. We have 5 acres of apples planted here on dwarf rootstocks in order to provide short trees for our pick-your-own customers. It's specifically a pedestrian orchard, allowing most picking to occur from the ground. We have 20 varieties here, including antiques like Newtown Pippin and Ashmead's Kernel, and then other old-time favorites, Red Delicious, Golden Delicious, and some more modern ones, Empire and Yodica, which is a early sport of Fuji, for example. So far, the customer traffic and revenues risen every year by a healthy percentage. Nevertheless, the trees are outpacing our sales growth, so we had a lot of drop this year, a lot of extra apples at the end of the season, so we hope to rectify that in coming years. There's even more people coming to pick their own at Hampton Station, Artisans Orchards. Here we are standing in front of the old dairy barn here at Soon's Orchards, built in 1938. The old barns that existed here, including an ice house and a cow barn and a horse barn, all burned in that year, 1938. On July 4th, my grandfather was down in the pilot meadow mowing when some passers-by on Lower Road yelled to him that the barn was afire. He came up here. He immediately went in and got some heifers out of the barn that were in stalls. As I understand it, no animals died as a result of that, but the barn was a total loss. My grandfather was beside himself. He contacted the insurance company, gave him a lot of static about how they wouldn't pay. We were in the Depression then, and insurance companies are doing their best generally not to pay off claims. So he called up Sid, his brother, an attorney in Manhattan. I got the insurance payment, and Sid kicked in a good amount of his own money as a gift, telling his brother Bon that, Bon, you want to build a barn that'll last 100 years. The barn was very well built. You'll see that there's foundation all the way around, 2 foot of concrete wall before the wood starts, and that means this barn is not rotted in any significant way in over 65 years now. We painted it this year. We brought the colors back that my grandfather selected in 1938. As a dairy barn, this was cream and green originally with a green roof. The roof is now silver. Of course, it's not a dairy barn anymore. We store apples in the southern half of it here, and lots of inventory in the back half, and hay still in the hay mow, which we bale about 4,000 or 5,000 bales a year. We didn't just paint the barn, but restored it to, as far as putting back trim that was there and taking off certain sheds that weren't there in the old days. Of course, these windows are covered over here because of the storage that's inside. We don't need light in there. These doors still need work. They're pretty beat up. Those are the old horse stall barn doors. That window over there had significant decay because of the silo shading it most of the day. Originally there were wood silos here, which were among the first in the town. My great-grandfather built. Of course, this silo here was built in the late 30s to replace those wood silos. And this one's made of cement with a steel roof. Here we have a shed that's added to house my father's old LaSalle. I built that shed back in the late 70s. Here you have the door to the bullpen, but we haven't had bulls here in a long time. The back of this barn was modified. Originally there were no doors in the back, but a window at the top, and the name Orchard Hill Farm was painted across here in red letters with a gray shadow to them. Later on we had to put a water tank in the barn, so they actually cut a hole in the back here wide enough to get the tank up into the hay mow there. You can see this seam of cut boards. In the late 60s my father put a shed on the back here to house the manure elevator that of course we don't need now, and the shed was something of an eyesore, being galvanized metal, interrupting the original architecture of the barn, so we took that off this summer, repainted underneath that. I expect to put sliding doors on there some point this year. Among the other things we did here, we restored the windows by scraping them down and recaulking all the panes.
Grandfather was on the ground floor on electricity, and he was working for Western Electric, and he wired up the Statue of Liberty and Flatiron Building and the big fancy hotel that was put up at that point, the Waldorf Astoria. After it was all in, they moved in. The manager noticed that if everybody hit the elevator switches simultaneously, the lights dimmed. So they welched on the whole deal. They wouldn't pay Western Electric. Western Electric gave my grandfather and his buddy a hard time, and they quit. One of the reasons my grandfather bought this farm, first, he was a real horticulturist, and he just loved to grow trees, any kind of tree. He had trees all over this place. He had 22 poplars up and down this road. He had pear trees over at Laura's. He had peach trees here and there, and he grew about every kind of apple you could think of. By 1918, they were actually shipping apples over to England. There were 2 ships went over. One left a week before the other. The first ship got torpedoed. The second ship, which had our apples on it, got into England, and they were completely out of apples, and they went bananas. They got 10 times the price they were expecting, and it put this farm on its feet because they were really dirt poor and not making it. And a few bucks came in, and that's when all the roofs were put on the house, and the kitchen was put on the house, and the roof was put on the tenant house, and all these very important items were taken care of. My father didn't want to farm, but he had to, and he didn't want me to farm. The last thing he wanted me to do was be a farmer. He said we were economic slaves, and he didn't want us to be a slave any longer. His one brother was a very successful lawyer in the city. He says, that's what you're going to do. Well, to reinforce this idea that I shouldn't stay around, he gave me every stinking, dirty, miserable job there was on this farm. He made me hate this place. And then I worked hard in high school, and I got a scholarship, and I went to Princeton. I worked hard there. I had good marks, and the whole world was opened up to me. I could have done anything I wanted to do. And I just got thinking about, what did I really want to do? And Sandy and I both we just thought the idea of commuting every day was just the most ridiculous way to spend your life, that we were not going to do that. So what did that leave? and all the guys I went to college with, and we were sitting around, I asked them what they wanted to do after they made their first bucks, and they wanted to do something they wanted to do. I said, what are you guys going to do? Oh, well, I'm going to go out and buy a little farm and go up there on weekends and fool around. I said, well, I'm going home, fool around on a little farm right now. I don't have to wait. So that's how it came about. I stayed home. And my father actually had this farm sold when I came home from the Army. That's how close we came to losing it.